In the journey of being human, perhaps there is no aspiration deeper and more enduring than the aspiration for freedom. Freedom from suffering, from anxiety, from the invisible bonds that tighten around the soul day after day. People travel the world in search of freedom, in money, fame, love, knowledge, but the more they search, the more bound they seem to become. Freedom appears very near, yet also impossibly distant. And within that very paradox, Buddhism emerges as a quiet path, not promising liberation through power or possession, but pointing to a profound truth: freedom does not lie outside, but arises from the very mind of each person. Buddhism does not speak of freedom in the way the world commonly understands it. Freedom in the Dharma is not the ability to do whatever one wants, unrestrained by others or by circumstances. For understood in that way, people easily fall into a new vicious circle: the more they chase desire, the more tightly desire binds them. The more they seek pleasure, the more they fear loss. The Buddha saw through this more than 2,000 years ago. He clearly perceived that the root of suffering does not lie in circumstances, but in the mind's attachment. And therefore, the path leading to true freedom does not lie in changing the world, but in transforming oneself. When speaking of freedom in Buddhism, we are speaking of an inner state of ease, no longer pulled by greed, anger, and delusion, no longer governed by fear, expectation, or the obsessions of the past. It is the freedom of one who has understood the impermanent nature of all phenomena, and no longer clings to what can never truly be held. This freedom is not loud or showy, yet it is deeper and more enduring than any freedom the world can offer. In modern life, people seem to possess more freedom than ever before. We can choose our careers, where we live, our relationships, our lifestyles. Yet paradoxically, levels of stress, depression, and anxiety continue to rise. For external freedom does not equate to inner freedom. A person may live amid material abundance, yet remain imprisoned by the fear of failure, by the pressure to succeed, by the anxiety of being judged. Buddhism calls this a subtle form of slavery, when one does not realize that one is being controlled by one's own thoughts and emotions. The Buddha's teachings do not aim to construct a belief system for people to cling to, but rather to help them let go of all forms of grasping. Even the teachings themselves are only a raft to cross the river, not something to carry for a lifetime. This is the core spirit of freedom in Buddhism, not being dependent on anything at all, including doctrines, concepts, or the ego. The freedom the Buddha pointed to does not lie in becoming someone, but in letting go of the illusion of a fixed self. From this perspective, Buddhism teaches people to turn back and observe themselves. To observe the breath, sensations, thoughts, and even the unconscious reactions to life. When we are mindful enough to see anger arising, we are no longer its slave. When we recognize that a desire is merely a passing wave, we are no longer swept away by it. Each such moment of awareness is a step taken on the path of freedom. Freedom in Buddhism does not come from rejecting life, but from deeply understanding life. A free person is not one who avoids suffering, but one who looks directly at suffering with wisdom and compassion. When we understand that all things are impermanent, we no longer fear loss. When we clearly see that all phenomena lack a separate self, we no longer need to defend our fragile ego. And when attachment is released, the mind naturally becomes light, open, and at ease. For this reason, Buddhism does not promise a heaven after death, but points out a path to live freely in the present moment. Each mindful breath, each conscious step, each moment of returning to oneself, all are expressions of true freedom. A freedom that does not depend on circumstances, is not governed by time, and does not need to be sought anywhere else. In today's ever-changing world, as people increasingly feel lost within their own lives, the Buddha's teaching on freedom becomes ever more valuable. It does not ask us to leave life behind, but invites us to live more deeply in each moment. There is no need to become someone else, no need to attain something distant, only to be mindful enough to see our own true nature. And we have already taken the first steps on the path of liberation. And perhaps the most beautiful aspect of the Buddha's teaching lies precisely here: freedom is not a distant destination, but a state that can be touched right now, right here, when the mind stops resisting, stops grasping, and learns to let go gently, mindfully, and with compassion. Freedom, in the view of Buddhism, is not a state attained through favorable circumstances, but the result of a profound process of contemplation into one's own true nature. When the Buddha attained enlightenment beneath the Bodhi tree, he did not gain power or a supernatural status, but reached complete understanding of suffering and the path to the cessation of suffering. From that realization, he pointed out that the greatest shackles of human beings do not lie in the external world, but within the mind itself, where craving, fear, and ignorance quietly govern every thought and action. One of the core lessons Buddhism offers is the truth of impermanence. All things and phenomena in life arise, exist, and pass away. Nothing is fixed, nothing can be held forever. Yet human beings, because they do not accept this truth, give rise to suffering. We want to preserve youth, cling to happiness, protect relationships, and control the future. It is precisely this resistance to the natural law that keeps the mind tense, anxious, and unsettled. Buddhism teaches that when we truly understand impermanence, we no longer cling, and at that very moment, freedom begins to reveal itself. Freedom in Buddhism is also inseparable from understanding suffering, an inescapable truth of human existence. Suffering is not only physical pain, loss, or illness, but also the sense of emptiness and dissatisfaction even when we obtain what we desire. The Buddha recognized that the source of suffering is craving, the never-ending thirst that can never be fully satisfied. When the mind is always directed outward in search of happiness, it remains perpetually restless. But when people turn inward, observing and clearly understanding the movements of the mind, they begin to dismantle the layers of invisible chains that bind them. A profoundly subtle point in Buddhist teaching is the concept of non-self. Human beings often believe there is a fixed self, an ego that must be protected, elevated, and affirmed. Yet it is precisely this belief that gives rise to conflict, comparison, competition, and suffering. When criticized, the ego is wounded. When unrecognized, the ego feels pain. When faced with loss, the ego is afraid. Buddhism points out that this self is in fact only a temporary combination of body and mind, constantly changing from moment to moment. When this is clearly seen, people begin to loosen their attachments, and with that, a vast space of inner freedom opens up. The freedom spoken of in Buddhism is not an escape from life, but the ability to live fully within life without being bound by it. One may work, love, build a family, and pursue ideals, yet still maintain inner ease if one does not identify with outcomes. One acts wholeheartedly, but does not let success or failure define personal worth. One loves deeply, but does not possess. One contributes, but does not seek repayment. This is inner freedom, a freedom that no one can take away. The practice of mindfulness is the practical path Buddhism offers for approaching freedom. When we place attention on the breath, the steps we take, and each small action, we begin to free ourselves from the dominance of the past and the future. Most human suffering does not reside in the present moment, but arises from regret over what has passed or fear of what has yet to come. Mindfulness brings us back to the moment that is, where life is truly unfolding. And when the mind abides in the present, it naturally becomes lighter, more stable, and freer. A particularly profound aspect of Buddhist teaching is the spirit of letting go. Letting go does not mean abandoning life or becoming indifferent, but learning not to cling tightly to anything. Letting go of expectations that exhaust us. Letting go of resentments that weigh heavily on the heart. Letting go of prejudices that narrow our vision. When we let go, we lose nothing at all, on the contrary. We regain peace, lightness, and a deep freedom within the soul. Buddhism also emphasizes the role of wisdom in the journey of liberation. Freedom does not come from blind belief, but from clear seeing and understanding. The Buddha taught not to hastily believe anything simply because of tradition, scriptures, or the words of others, but to personally contemplate and experience for oneself. It is this clarity and awareness that prevent people from being led by fear, superstition, or the false values of society. When wisdom illuminates the path, one is no longer swept along by the crowd, but can live in alignment with one's own inner truth. At a deeper level, freedom in Buddhism is also liberation from the cycle of birth and death, a state in which the mind is no longer governed by ignorance and karmic forces. However, even without attaining ultimate enlightenment, each person can still taste partial freedom within everyday life. Each time we choose understanding over anger, letting go over grasping, awareness over escape, we move one step closer to freedom. It can be said that Buddhism does not teach people how to change the world, but how to change the way they see the world. When the mind is transformed, the world transforms accordingly. Things that once caused suffering suddenly become lighter. Things that once inspired fear no longer hold power. And in that stillness, we suddenly realize, freedom has never been far away, it has always been present in each breath, each mindful moment, waiting for us to return and recognize it. It is precisely here that the door to true freedom opens, not loudly, not ostentatiously, but quietly, enduringly, and filled with peace, when we go deeper into the spirit of freedom that Buddhism points to. We begin to realize that freedom is not an explosive state or a glorious moment, but a quiet, enduring, and very ordinary process. It does not appear as a reward, but arises naturally as people gradually understand and let go of what is no longer necessary for inner peace. The deeper we walk this path, the more clearly we see that most human suffering does not come from circumstances, but from the way we respond to circumstances. One of the most subtle chains that bind human beings is the identification of oneself with one's thoughts. We often believe that we are what we think, what we feel. When a negative thought arises, we are immediately swept away by it. When a painful memory surfaces, we allow it to define who we are. But Buddhism teaches that thoughts are merely phenomena arising and passing within the mind, they are not our true essence. When we learn to observe thoughts instead of dissolving into them, a space of freedom immediately appears. In that space, we are no longer victims of the mind, but become mindful observers. From here, we also understand more clearly why Buddhism emphasizes mindfulness in every moment. Mindfulness is not a state of tension or rigid control, but a gentle, wholehearted presence with whatever is happening. When drinking a sip of water and clearly knowing that one is drinking, when walking and feeling each movement of the body, when listening without judgment, this is freedom manifesting. For in those moments, the mind is no longer pulled back into the past or projected into the future. It rests in the present, where there is no fear or anxiety. Buddhism also points out that one of the reasons human beings lose their freedom is constant comparison. We compare ourselves with others. Compare the present with the past, compare reality with idealized images in the mind. This comparison gives rise to feelings of lack, inferiority, or arrogance. When the mind is always oriented outward to measure self-worth, it can never be at ease. Conversely, when we turn back to recognize our inherent value, without needing to prove anything, without competition, we begin to touch a deeper level of freedom, where there is no rivalry or craving for recognition. Another important aspect of freedom in Buddhism is forgiveness and compassion. Holding resentment is like imprisoning oneself in an invisible jail. We think we are punishing others, but in reality, we are hurting ourselves. When we learn to forgive, not because others deserve it, but because we ourselves need peace, we loosen one of the heaviest chains of the soul. Compassion, in its deeper meaning, is not only kindness toward others, but the understanding that everyone is struggling with their own suffering. With this understanding, we judge less, grow less angry, and naturally become lighter. Buddhism does not encourage people to run away from negative emotions, but teaches them to look directly at these emotions with mindfulness. Sadness, fear, disappointment, all are part of life. When we dare to stay with these feelings without resistance or denial, they gradually lose their power to dominate us. It is precisely through this honest facing that inner strength is nurtured and inner freedom begins to form. We are no longer swept away by emotions, but learn to embrace them with understanding and compassion. One profound realization that many people come to only after a long period of practice is this: freedom does not come from having more, but from having less. Less expectation, less attachment, less fear, less need for control. When the mind becomes simpler, life becomes lighter. Buddhism does not advocate an extreme ascetic lifestyle, but encourages simplicity, because the fewer the bonds, the easier it is for people to touch peace. A mind not burdened by excessive desire is a free mind. At a deeper level, the freedom that Buddhism points toward no longer depends on external conditions. Whether amid success or failure, praise or blame, a person with wisdom maintains inner ease. They understand that all states are temporary, coming and going like clouds drifting across the sky. This understanding helps them avoid being swept into emotional turbulence, preventing them from losing themselves amid life's changes. And then, when the inner journey goes deep enough, one begins to realize a truth that is very simple yet immensely powerful: freedom is not something to be attained, but something to be remembered. It has always been present in the nature of the mind, merely obscured by ignorance, fear, and attachment. As these layers are gradually removed, freedom naturally reveals itself, quiet, steady, and unshakable. From here, the path toward the final part of the journey opens, a path that does not turn outward, but returns inward, that does not seek anything new, but lets go of what is unnecessary, that does not chase a distant ideal, but lives fully in the present moment. And in that return, human beings touch what they have long been searching for, a profound, silent, and enduring freedom that rises above all the fluctuations of life. As this journey of contemplation gradually comes to a close, what remains is not lofty concepts or abstract philosophies, but a very simple question: how free are we actually living in our own lives? For freedom, in the light of Buddhism, has never been something to search for far away. It does not lie in success, it is not hidden in the recognition of others, nor does it come from controlling the world around us. Freedom begins at the moment we turn back to look at ourselves and realize that most of the chains we carry are created by our own minds. Human beings suffer not because life is too harsh, but because we want life to be different according to our wishes. We want things to be stable while the very nature of life is impermanence. We want to be loved without loss, to succeed without failure, to be at peace without having to face pain. It is precisely these expectations that bind us to suffering, even though outwardly no one is imprisoning us. Buddhism does not deny suffering, nor does it promise a perfect life. But it offers something far more precious: the ability to look directly at the truth without fear. When we are courageous enough to see that everything is impermanent, that nothing truly belongs to us forever, the fear of loss gradually dissolves. When we understand that the self is only a constantly changing stream, we no longer need to protect it with anxiety and tension. And it is precisely in this letting go that freedom arises. Freedom is not loud. It does not appear in moments of victory or competition. Freedom comes very quietly, very gently, like a deep breath after we stop resisting. It is when we accept something that does not go our way without resentment. When we face sadness without running away. When we understand that we do not need to become someone else in order to have value. There is a simple yet profound truth: the more we try to control life, the more freedom we lose. The more we loosen our grip on control, the lighter we feel. Letting go does not mean abandoning responsibility, but abandoning attachment. Letting go of expectations that exhaust us. Letting go of prejudices that close our hearts. Letting go even of the idealized images of ourselves that we strain to maintain. And then, in that stillness, we begin to live more authentically. We listen to our bodies. We respect our emotions. We slow our steps in a world that is rushing. We no longer need to prove anything to anyone. That is the sign of a soul gradually being liberated. Buddhism does not teach us to escape life, but to live more deeply within it. Not by possessing more, but by understanding more. Not through control, but through mindfulness. Not through struggle, but through wise acceptance. Looking back, we may realize that freedom has never been outside. It is always present in each moment we know how to pause, how to breathe, how to observe, how to let go. Freedom is when we are no longer pulled by the past, nor haunted by the future. Freedom is when we live fully with the moment that is, no matter how ordinary that moment may be. If these lines have touched you, perhaps it is because somewhere within you there is also a deep wish to live more lightly, more peacefully, and more truthfully with yourself. This journey does not need to be rushed. It only requires a little mindfulness each day, a little letting go, a little returning. If you wish to continue accompanying these reflections on the Dharma, mindfulness, and the path back to the inner life, please leave a comment below. Your presence and contemplation are the motivation that allows these contents to continue spreading. And if you feel that these values are meaningful, please subscribe to the channel so that we can walk together on a path of deeper, more mindful, and freer living each day. For in the end, freedom is not a place we will arrive at. Freedom is the way we are living, right in this very moment.